Greetings, Mark Garang here, publisher of the Conway Daily Sun, and my guest is Russell Prescott, who's running for Congress. How you doing, Russell?
Great. Nice to see you, Mark.
And just to remind viewers, we're doing this on Thursday morning, and it's a couple hours before you're going to be doing the debate with Chris Pappas at Valley Vision.
Sure.
So good luck with that. So remind our viewers a little bit about yourself, Russell.
Certainly.
History. Sure.
Yeah, I grew up in Exeter. My mom and dad were business partners. They started a business in 1954. I run that business today, and for 40 years after graduating from the University of South Florida with a bachelor's of science in mechanical engineering. Did many well pump system designs, community water system designs as a professional engineer for 30 years. I have 7 patents that we actually manufacture our own equipment because you're always trying to solve problems as an engineer. And that's what I did. I found new ways of solving old problems, and the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office verified, but they trusted me with patents. And then, of course, when I was going to Exeter High School, I want to mention that I met the love of my life, and I've been a great husband for 42 years, I think.
Yeah.
A loyal, trustworthy.
Well, we can ask her.
I know. And then 5 children and 8 grandchildren.
Wow.
And during that time, I decided that I could give back to the community, and I worked in trying to get into office. The first time I ran, I got 36% of the vote, and the second time I ran, I became a state senator, stopped an income tax, stopped a sales tax, where we balanced our budget by reducing taxes and also by cutting spending to be able to make sure that New Hampshire stayed on an even keel with taxes. And that
so
was where
your first foray was as a state senator.
That's correct. Yeah, that occurred in year 2000.
Okay.
I served until 2004.
Yeah.
And then I won again in 2010, and did that same thing. We balanced our budget. It was a budget deficit at the time. Actually, it was 1% of our gross domestic product was the budget deficit. It was huge in terms of our GDP, and we were able to do that by weighing our wants and our needs and making sure we took care of our needs. But the wants had to go for that session, and we balanced our budget, made sure we didn't raise taxes, and kept our economy going. I served for 6 years at that time, and then in 2016, I became the executive counselor for District 3 for New Hampshire. When when Chris Sununu left that seat, he said, I'm going to run for the governorship. He called me up and said, when I'm telling people I'm running for governor, they're saying, well, Russell should run for the executive council. And so I did that and served 4 years, retired in 2021, right around the same time that my brother, who I was partners with for so many years in the company, the family business, he wanted to retire. So I purchased the company in 2020, and now I run it. I got 50 employees, and really the greatest thing ever is that my 3 oldest children, who are in their 30s, are running the day-to-day operations of the business. This is now a 3rd generation business here in New Hampshire, where we pay 100% of health care for our employees and make sure that we, do right by our customers, high quality products. They trust it. We sell to well drillers and pump installers and all over the New England, and distribute right there out of Exeter in the old brass foundry that my dad bought later after he purchased the company. After he started the company, he purchased it in 1963.
Wow.
And so we've been in the same location in Exeter on Railroad Ave since 1963. So it's been
that's a great,
wonderful thing.
that's a good story, and it's nice that your sons are involved with the business and allows you to.
Yep. My oldest daughter managed me for 10 years while I was an executive counselor. And then when my 2 boys came into the business in their 30s, now she manages those 2.
Okay, so I said 3 sons, but I thought you said that. No, it's a daughter. Great, that's a great combination.
Yeah.
So, one thing, because you're up against Chris Pappas, and he's been our congressman for 6 years, I guess now. And but both of you are nice. Like Chris Pappas is just a nice guy,
yes, he
and
is.
I think part of your campaign is to be nice, right? Be civil. Nice is maybe civil is a better word. So, talk about that, and talk about how and obviously, let's get to the issues of what separate you and Chris.
Yeah.
So, well, let me ask you this first.
Yeah.
What's your 1 or 2 top issues that you're running on?
Well, you got to make sure we stop inflation and secure our border so we can have a better immigration system. Those are the 2 top issues. I think when you speak about inflation, it covers all the other issues. Housing, if we didn't have so much inflation, housing would be more affordable. If we didn't have the inflation that caused the Federal Reserve to raise our interest rates, we'd have housing more affordable. With inflation, we have higher food costs, we have higher rents. It goes across the board. And then with the immigration system, I would love to have more people for employment here in New Hampshire. We are one of the lowest employment in the country because I think it's because I did a good job as a state senator, being business friendly and making sure we have a strong economy. People are driving to New Hampshire and wanting to live here. And so we've done that so well, safest state in the country,
Sure.
One of the freest states in the country. We really need more workforce, and trying to build it from within has become difficult. Mm-hmm. And when we have this immigration system where we want to have people come into our country and be able to get right to work, it's taking too long. People are waiting years, and I think that's the reason why we're having such an impetus of people trying to come over the wrong way, because the right way is taking too long. We need to streamline our immigration system to make sure we have good qualified people here to come into our melting pot, become part of America, and be able to come with their head held high and saying that I want to be part of the American dream. And that's those 2 of the biggest issues for me. We're doing it wrong with immigration now. It can be altered and changed immediately by the administration if they started enforcing our laws that have been promulgated for dozens of years. But really, we need to also, in the legislative process, reform immigration.
Because what the Democrats are saying, and I think everybody agrees that the immigration process has been basically broken.
Yeah.
The legal immigration process has been broken for decades, and neither party really wants to handle it. And the Democrats say that they had a fix, and that Trump, last session came in and just said he's talked to a few people in Congress and he scuttled it only for his own means to make the administration look bad. I mean, how much do you blame the Biden administration? How much do you blame just the system itself?
I think that when you say in a bill that you want no more than 5,000 people coming here illegally, I think that's the wrong way again. So in that bill, that's what it was. We're going to cap illegal immigration at 5,000 people. We need to cap it lower than that. That was a real serious problem with the bill. So I think that when you want to place blame, there's plenty to go around. And when you talk about me running a positive campaign and wanting to, just be like I am as a businessman, we want to give good customer service, high quality products. I was not always that way. I learned that negative campaigning might work once or twice, but eventually somebody else is going to be a better negative campaigner than you. And if you lose by your negative campaigning, you really lose a lot of your opportunity to be able to reach across the aisle when you get elected. And this has been a real difficult campaign for me, trying to stay exactly how I've always been since 2004, a positive campaign, and being disappointed about Chris Pappas. Our what would you call it? Our debates are very cordial, and we're talking back and forth, and we're talking about issues, and we're trying to solve them, right? In fact, we've worked together on the executive council to solve problems together, bipartisanly, and yet his campaign outwardly on the news media and all that is pretty, discouraging for me. The 8 really most difficult words that I've heard in the last 2 months are, I'm Chris Pappas and I approve this message. It's really not the Chris Pappas that I know.
Well, and and that's a tough one too, because a lot of that money with the mailers and stuff is not local money, right? It's national money and PAC money, and the gubernatorial candidates, Joyce Craig and Kelly Ayotte, were in town, and they did a debate the other day. And I was sitting with Adam Sexton at WMUR, and I said, what do you think the top issues are to voters' minds?
Right.
And it's abortion with Ayotte, and raising taxes with Joyce, and both of those are a little unfair. I mean, things in New Hampshire, the abortion's not going to change, the law's not going to change, we're not going to put a sales tax in, but that's what's in people's minds because of all this incredible amount of money that's put into these campaigns, and so when they're negative about you, and I haven't seen that one actually, but I've seen some rough ones on poor Joyce Craig. You know, there was a mailer, and on one side of her face, on one side of the mailer was a mole on this side of her face. On the other side of the mailer, the mole was on this side of her face, and she doesn't have a mole.
I know, I know. So 2 years ago when she was running for mayor, they did that. They had the mirror image instead of her normal image, both in the same commercial. For her, it was amazing that you could look at it. Well, that's the mirror image of her face. That's they switched it somehow, and it does not look good. And that was even on her own. And it was on her own advertisement. I think she missed it.
Oh gosh. So on inflation, this will be a little test of your partisanship. You know, it's easy to say, well, it happened. It's all Biden's fault. Inflation's all Biden's fault. And we know that inflation was, I think, in his first year, 2011, was at its highest. It was like 8 or 9%, and now it's down to like 2.5%. And so I think another view is that, well, it's either all Biden's fault or it was the pandemic and the supply chain, because obviously Biden didn't cause worldwide inflation, you know, in 1 year. So where do you kind of fall on that spectrum of who's the blame on this?
I certainly know that the lack of fiscal responsibility is the reason why we have inflation. If you borrow money because you want to, get something done, if it's, relief for COVID or whatever, you really need not to borrow money. You need to find out where you can make adjustments in your budget and, micromanage your budget. Today, we do not even follow our 1974 Balanced Budget Act. We don't. It's not a balanced budget. It's just a budget act. It's a timeline. The president's supposed to give their budget, and then you have 12 subcommittees in the House of Representatives where they talk about all of the spending, line by line. It's not happening any longer. We have continuing resolutions instead, and then it's just shuffled under the rug that we've got $1.5 trillion in debt spending still today. That's the problem. The last 2 years, we shouldn't have had as much spending as we had. I understand the first 2 years of Biden's campaign, everybody was hurting. We needed to, along that line, say, we need to start balancing our budget. That's the reason why I'm running. And 2 years ago, I was saying the same thing. And, inflation was at 9% or 8%, wherever it was. I think that just the compounding of the effect, the supply chain problems that happened during COVID, has really exacerbated the problem. But to say that, whatever administration it was, that 50% growth in our budget, in our national debt in 4 years, that's insane. From 22 trillion to 33 trillion is 50%. In that range is what it's been for the last 4 years. If we continue on this route, 50% every 4 years, we are not going to be able to tackle inflation.
And I think what's discouraging about that is, and you're right about Biden, but the Trump administration spent equal as much. I mean, he added $7 or $9 trillion to the debt too.
In 4 years.
In 4 years. And then when you look at Harris and Trump now, I mean, it depends on what station you're watching, but both their plans, they're adding trillions of dollars to the debt. I mean, some people say it's going to be more with Trump because he's promising all these tax cuts. Some people say it's more with Harris because of all the special things she wants to do for homeowners and small businesses and all that. So, boy, like where's the momentum going to start or stop this deficit spending when both parties, neither party, I mean, the conservatives, Republicans were always for the, that was one thing you count on for Republican Party was a conservative budget, but that's not true anymore.
It is tough. And when I mentioned balancing the budget with 1% of the GDP, we were able to do it in 1 year here in New Hampshire. Even with our limited government we have, we're very frugal in our government, we were still able to do 1%. In Washington, D.C., we're at 6% of GDP is our budget deficit, 1.5 trillion, 2 trillion in that range. We can say, what's the New Hampshire pattern? Well, we were able to cut spending and balance 1%. We should be able to do that every year So that would be like $300 billion. Reduce our budget deficit by $300 billion. Bring it down to 0 in 6 years. That it just takes line by line, following the law of the Budget Act, and make sure you get down in those subcommittee levels and find out what are your wants and what are your needs. Make sure you take care of the needs. And we know there's plenty, right? We could talk more than a half an hour on international policies that are going on that are harming our country. But we need to make sure we take care of America first and still be able to be that shining light on the hill for the rest of the world. We got to do both.
So outside of you and Chris being nice guys, and civil to each other, and I think if Chris was here, he would say, yes, we got to control the budget. Yes, we have to control the border. So I'm a voter. Yeah. Why do I vote for you and not Chris?
We've had more of the same for the past 4 years. We've had more of the same where he's saying, I will always stand up to President Biden when he's not doing what's good for New Hampshire. Those are his words, and it's not happened. He's voted 100% of the time in one of these outside groups that says who's partisan and who's bipartisan. Well, it says it's 100% rating that he votes with Joe Biden all of the time. And that's a problem. And I think you can see it. It's obvious. Our problems have gotten worse. 50% more national debt. I'm a problem solver. I'm an engineer. Washington needs more engineers to just solve the problem and not just get down there and blend in. In fact, when I first decided to run for office, it wasn't my decision only. It was my wife and I, and she says, you're going to go down to the swamp? You're going to go down there and where people turn into something different? Then I don't want that to happen to you, Russell. Make sure that I go with you. And I'm promising to go with you and be a part of it and make sure that I keep my feet firmly on New Hampshire's ground. And I can, because what's driven me to be in public service is my 6th great-grandfather. He died at the Battle of Bunker Hill. He lived in Raymond, New Hampshire. He left his young wife. He left his infant son and gave his life for my state. And I'm trying to do the same thing. I don't want to stand by and say, I didn't do enough. I didn't do as much as my John Prescott and the heritage of the Prescott name. I want to make sure that I can sleep well at night and say I've given it my all. And that's why for the past 40 years, I've dedicated myself to public service, to being a good boss, and just being trustworthy and hoping that people understand that they can trust me to do the job. I will do all the good that Chris Pappas has done, but I will do. There's 3 things, as I mentioned. The third one is energy independence. But the immigration reform, we've got to get that done. And then the balancing the budget, we've got to do that. And I've done it. I've proven I can do it. The people have trusted me as an executive counselor, 1/5 the population of the state getting me into office. Please trust me for half the population of the state to get me into office in Washington, D.C. so I can do what I've done my whole life and solve problems. I'm an engineer. We need more engineers in Washington.
When you mentioned energy independence, though, and that's another one. It depends on which side of the coin you're on, because we're producing more. I mean, when Obama first got in, we produced like 3 million barrels a day, and then it had nothing to do with Obama. That's when fracking came in 2008 or 9, whenever that was, and so it has increased steadily since then. And now we're up to like 13 or 14 million barrels a day, and we're the biggest producer in the world. We're the huge exporter of natural gas. So at the same time, there's a lot of alternative energy going on. I mean, Texas is like 1/3 of their energy is now wind and solar. So what can you do more than that's already been done? And I'll just finish this by saying that just reading in the Wall Street Journal the other day is that some of the natural gas producers are they're closing some of the wells because the price is so low. I mean, part of it's just a market condition. It's not just, let's open up more land for drilling. It's really about market forces at this point. Do you think so?
I don't, because I believe that in addition to us being more dependent on foreign oil, which is what's going on, is that
but we're a net exporter now. How are we dependent? I mean, we're a net exporter.
Well, I'd have to look that up, because seriously, if our refineries are the ones that I believe are the most ecologically, environmentally sound, and yet around our country is we're having all of this energy in oil And I thought that I was coming into our country because we're less energy independent. If we were having, you know, abundance of oil being produced here, wouldn't we keep it here? You know, that's my position. So, but add that and compound this is that we have let Iran have their sanctions lifted, and then they've become a richer nation because of it. And now we see the result of it with invasion of Israel, and you know, October 7th was funded partially by Iran. And there's just a foreign policy issue there as well. So I think energy independence is so important, and we should be that, and we should continue sanctioning Iran and not lifting those sanctions. There's a problem in the energy, you know, part of the world.
And certainly, and a lot of that, I think that idea of there's a lot of oil, like we're a net exporter and we produce more fossil fuels than anybody in the world, but there's stuff going in and out. Like, you know, there's some kind of distillates coming in that we can't produce enough, and it goes out. And with natural gas, of course, we're building a lot of these liquefied natural gas terminals because we're supplying Western Europe in place. Speaking of which, what's your position on Ukraine? Some of the conservatives are not supporting, as you know, they're not particularly on the more the far right of the Conservative Party. Where do you stand on Ukraine?
Well, you got to have empathy. You got to have a compassion on them. They were invaded. They are fighting in their own backyard, trying to just save their homeland. I have complete sympathy for that and want to do as much as I can as a person as well as a country. However, we can't do it at the expense of not taking care of things at home, of course. You know, we should be considering America first, and also at the same time considering what roles we're going to play around the world. If we can, you know, make sure that we take care of our people on the Veterans Affairs, we take care of balancing our budget, we make sure we reduce inflation, get the interest rates down. We do that at the same time and help somebody outside of our country, great. But we have to take care of us first.
So does that mean, because Ukraine, I mean, the other side to that, and I don't know if you're saying that I guess the question is, would you support Ukraine as much as the Biden administration is committed to, or?
I would say no, if that all we're going to do is commit to Ukraine. If we commit to, you know, a balanced budget or getting to a balanced budget at the same time, I would say yes. We need to make sure that America comes from first, and that's my position. If we have a clean bill that says, here, we can do this for Ukraine, I would say, hey, we haven't, you know, done our own homework before we start doing somebody else's.
But the Ukraine, I mean, you know, this is an interesting debate, I suppose.
Sure.
But I mean, we have an obligation as the Budapest Agreement, where we guaranteed their security as a sovereign nation back in the 90s when they gave up all the nuclear weapons. And it's only like we only spend like 1% of our defense budget on Ukraine, and that we're spending it on munitions in our country that's creating jobs. So I don't think I'm not sure that argument holds true that we have to do one or the other. In this case, we can really do both.
If we can reduce our budget deficit, then we can do both.
All right. And we only have 5 or 6 minutes left.
Sure.
Abortion's a big issue. Where are you on the spectrum of pro-life, pro-choice?
I am a pro-life candidate, of course, but I'm also a person that swears an oath to to uphold the Bill of Rights. The 10th Amendment is the rights for the state. If they don't give them up, it's their right. And this is where it has to stay. If there's anything to do with abortion, of laws that, you know, my party might bring forward that are going to, you know, take the rights away from my state to be able to govern themselves, I will vote against it.
And what about if there was a national, I mean, of course, the counter argument to that is that from an individual's point of view, what difference does it make whether the federal government or state government is telling you what a woman can do with their health issues? So if you're pro-life, would you support a national ban as a congressman?
No, I would not, for sure, because what separates us from a democracy, where a democracy can, by a majority vote, can take away your rights, is we have this Bill of Rights. And this Bill of Rights, if we don't uphold those Bill of Rights, we become a democracy. It's a mobocracy at that point. We got to follow our laws. I follow the law when I take my oath of office when I was 5 terms in the state Senate and the Executive Council. Make sure that people in Congress think the same way. I will bring that attitude towards the people in Congress. Is that don't take away the state's, my state's rights, where my 6th great-grandfather died for that state. Don't take those rights away.
So so your position is that you support states' rights
Yes.
on the pro-life, pro-abortion issue,
Yep.
pro-choice issue. Alrighty, and then I guess lastly, we only got a couple minutes here. So what overhangs all the election is Trump. So
Yes.
and where are you on Trump?
I am with Trump. He's the nominee. Now I support him for president. I will support him on those things that we need to get done. Balance our budget, cut the deficit, and make sure we become energy efficient, and also, start enforcing the law. Administration, start administrating the law, and cut down on this illegal immigration. The Border Patrol people have said, if you would just give us the tools, we will enforce the laws, and we can stop 70% of this illegal immigration happening. That's why I'm for President Trump in those 3 areas.
Now, what about, do you agree, and J.D. Vance has been pretty vocal about that, he agrees with Trump that Trump didn't lose the election in 2020. Where do you stand on that?
I stand the same way I did 2 years ago.
Which is what?
Joe Biden's our president, and who the people of America lost. We have higher inflation now we've ever had. We have, what we have is open borders, and he won the election, but we have open borders. He won the election, we have higher inflation. He won the election, we're not energy independent. These things we must change. So I agree. President Biden won the election. We need to make sure we have a bit brighter future by enforcing our laws at the border, balancing our budget, and become energy efficient.
And of course, the Democrats are saying, and some Republicans actually are saying, this is really on the national level between Trump and Harris, it's about democracy. I mean, you've got Bob Woodward has a book out with Milley, former Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying that Trump is basically a fascist. And you've got the Bushes, the Cheneys, John Bolton, all these high-level, the former Secretary of Defense, all not supporting Trump. Does that at all make a difference to you and what you think about Trump, and if there is a threat to democracy with him?
What I can do is make sure that we uphold the Constitution. Something that Chris Pappas is not doing when he says, I want codify in federal law Roe v. Wade. That's, again, taking away our 10th Amendment right. He's breaking his oath of office by saying, I don't want New Hampshire to have a voter ID bill. I'm going to make a federal law. We're going to do federally how people run their elections. He's taken people's rights away. I want to make sure I protect those rights. My great-grandfather died for those rights, and I want to make sure we preserve those rights. That's the most important, to keep your oath of office, and that's the most important thing. That's why we have the oath of office in our Constitution. So we're not a democracy where it can just be removed, rights can be removed from us with a simple democratic vote. That's not good. We got to make sure we obey the law and uphold our Constitution, defend our Constitution, and be very, very vocal about it. And that's not happening today.
All righty. Well, we're going to leave it on that, Russell. If viewers, you should watch this before, because then this will be on Valley Vision, and then the debate. We'll see how consistent you are between this and the debate, Russell.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
My
good luck.
Too. Thank you so much.
Thanks.